Thank you, everyone. Michael, thanks for the words and the opening remarks. My name is Andrew Kiguel. I'm the CEO of tokens.com. And I think what I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to lead into a conversation around Metaverse. But before getting there, I wanted to talk a little bit about my background and what brought me here. So I was an investment banker for 20 years out of Toronto with a focus on bringing unique products to public market investors. And I really made a career out of that. And back in 2017, I realized that there wasn't really an efficient product for public market investors to get exposure to Bitcoin. This is before regulations had evolved to where they are today, where there's Bitcoin ETFs and various funds. Back then, for a public market investor, there really wasn't a lot of or any way to get exposure to Bitcoin. So myself and some other people created a company called Hut 8, which was a Bitcoin mining company that held all of its Bitcoin, and we took that public. And by virtue of that company being public, we provided public market investors, family offices, institutions, exposure to all things related to Bitcoin. That company turned out to be very successful. It now trades on the NASDAQ. It's got a market cap of over $2 billion. And it accomplished that goal of getting really exposure for people into things, Bitcoin, if you were a public investor. And what led me to that was that when I went and purchased my own Bitcoin, it's an intimidating process. Creating these online accounts, these wallets, wiring money offshore, figuring out how to buy it, how to secure it, it can be intimidating for a lot of people. So this is a way of creating a method for people to get that exposure in a way they're accustomed to. So fast forward a little bit to tokens.com. I started hearing about staking a couple of years ago and how this was a clean energy alternative to Bitcoin mining, and that it provided the same service as a crypto miner, but it did so without the use of electricity or hardware. It did it instead through ownership of the token and putting that token up as collateral to provide the validation services. And just like a crypto miner, you would get rewarded back in additional tokens. And so at the time, I had a light bulb go off to say, hey, this is another area that is potentially challenging for institutions, family offices, and retail investors to get access to, just by virtue of having to research all of this. How do you secure it? How do you report it? And so we created tokens.com as a company that would hold staking assets, so tokens used for staking, as a way to give people exposure to crypto, again, through a public vehicle. I always give the example that Bitcoin is one of the easiest things that you can buy in the crypto world. It's got a lot of advantages to owning it directly too. You can trade it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can even find ways to earn interest off it. Yet there's still a massive amount of people that would prefer to own ETFs and funds like the Grayscale to get that exposure to Bitcoin because it's public and it allows them to hold it in the same way that they hold their other stocks. And so even though there's a lot of advantages and it's probably cheaper, you don't have to pay management fees to buy it yourself, people would still prefer to pay 2% and have somebody else do it through this other vehicle because it's public. It's the same philosophy in tokens.com. Our largest shareholders are institutions. In fact, Canada's largest technology fund is our largest shareholder. And they own us because they say, look, we would like to get exposure to the cryptocurrencies that you hold and stake, but we don't have the ability or the capacity to do that ourselves. And so what we're really doing there is we're solving a problem for them by giving them this public vehicle that they can trade. They have liquidity in. It trades, we trade in Canada, the US, and in Europe. And they get that exposure without having to figure out how to do it themselves. So that's the problem that we solve. So how did that lead us into Metaverse assets? With the exact same philosophy of giving people exposure to things built on crypto or related to crypto that they might find challenging to do themselves, brought us to the Metaverse. And originally we started looking at Metaverse real estate and thinking a lot of the things in the Metaverse and related to Metaverse real estate have the similar attributes to Bitcoin, meaning that there is an increasing popularity and awareness of the product with a scarce demand. And so that got us thinking that this would be a good asset to roll into and have exposure to for the shareholders of tokens.com. So in terms of the metaverse, and I know there's going to be other people speaking about this, so I'll try and keep it very, very high level, but the metaverse is not a new concept. I often like to say that this is more of an evolution, not a revolution. The metaverse term was coined in a book from 1992 called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, who's a very popular science fiction writer. Really, what it relates to is any three-dimensional world that you can enter into via a character or an avatar. You know, you can really say that the Matrix movies are based on metaverses, Ready Player One. And if you go back even further in history, things like The Sims or Second Life or even Vice City for people who played that, anywhere where you're entering a 3D world is considered a metaverse where you can go in and explore. So why has the metaverse all of a sudden become such a hot topic? Why is everyone talking about it? Facebook certainly has a part to do with that, in that they decided to do the largest rebrand in history by converting their company to a metaverse company, which is going to take place, I suspect, over the next 12 to 24 months as they build this out. And it's pretty exciting. But I think there's some other things here that sort of have intersected to make this the right time for the metaverse. Why I guess the technology and all of the rest of these things have come to the forefront again. So the first thing is the technology. If you think back to prior attempts at metaverses, I don't think that the technology was quite ready yet. And what I mean by that, it's the graphics, the speed of the GPUs and the processors. It is the internet connections, all of these things that I think have advanced so much in the last 10, 15 years. You know, when you think back to early computing, the types of things that you could do were limited by the technology. Today, as that technology continues to improve and evolve, we're able to accomplish a lot more. The second thing that I think continues to be very relevant in bringing metaverses to the forefront that not a lot of people are talking about, but it's COVID. Back in 2000, when the government reaction to many things related to COVID were to shut down museums, clubs, restaurants, and limit travel. What this did is that it took away people's ability, what I think is something that they innately require, which is a need to socialize and interact. It's more of a psychology that they require as opposed to, you know, something that is tangible. And what people decided to do is that the experience that you might have had through Facebook or Instagram or other social media just wasn't enough. It wasn't giving them that socialization experience that they needed and were craving, that they were no longer able to do based on the restrictions that occurred all over the world. And so they started turning to these metaverses to say, we don't need to go to a physical museum right now because it's closed, but we can meet friends and people and go to virtual museums. We may not be able to go to that concert anymore, but we can go and attend a virtual concert and be there, regardless of where you're geographically located, with other people who are like-minded. And so that was the other piece that I think intersects here and make this the right time for metaverse. And there's a third piece, and this might be the most important piece, which is blockchain technology. And so what blockchain technology allows us to do, if you think to the genesis of this, you know, blockchain technology really came to the forefront back in 2008 through the Bitcoin white paper, which was this ability to have unique ownership over something digital and be able to trade it. It allowed for authenticity and a term borrowed from the art world called provenance, which is I can see the origin history, I can make sure that something is authentic, and I can move it around this virtual ledger called the blockchain. So why is that important in terms of these metaverses? Well, metaverses today have taken a leap from what I would call Web 2.0, which would be the previous attempts at metaverses, call it like Vice City or the Second Lives, where you go in and it is created for you, curated by the owners of that program. So in the case of something like, you know, Vice City or whatever, the video game programmer would create that. What's become different here, and a game changer, pun intended, in the metaverse world, is that you can have ownership. These cities are created in partnership with the users. As a owner of land or as a user of these metaverses, you're really contributing to the content, to the building, and to the creation of a community there that is being used by people. It is no longer being delivered to you in a package and saying, take it or leave it. You're actually becoming part of that process. And that's Web 3.0. And this ownership aspect is really important to that, because you can go in there and you can own a parcel of land that is unique. It is an NFT based parcel that has its own digital signature that you can trade, you can store, you can build an experience for other users on, you can find ways to monetize. And this is very different. And it's also what's leading the revolution in the play to earn space, where the video gaming industry is also moving to the sector. So we became, I guess, notable in this space through the group that we purchased, Metaverse Group. We did a purchase of a massive parcel of land in Decentraland for about $2.5 million about 4 weeks ago in the Fashion District. And that made news all over the world, because at the time, that was the largest land purchase made in the Metaverse in history. And we got a lot of interesting reactions, some very positive reactions, and some people who were really just scratching their heads. And I still go to some meetings and people scratch their heads and say, you paid $2.5 million for parcels of digital real estate in the Metaverse. There was one very famous financier who tweeted, and he compared our purchase to the tulip bubble. He said the tulip bubble looked conservative relative to the valuations that we were paying. And I don't quite think he understood that this is on the pathway to becoming $1 trillion business. And let me explain to you a little bit why I think this is a pathway to $1 trillion industry. And it's not just, by the way, me who has this sentiment. Morgan Stanley just published something that said they estimate this to be an $8 trillion industry. And let me explain why the different areas that are intersecting again here to make all of this possible, because it's pretty exciting. Number one, social media. Social media has billions of people around the world. And what I would say is that the metaverse is really the next iteration of social media. It's that next level of immersion and interaction that people are seeking today, especially as the COVID lockdowns continue in places like North America. It's a way for people to take that experience and beyond just taking a picture of your vacation or your food, but actually start interacting with people and socializing and playing games with them and talking and going to concerts. It's the next level for connectivity. So if you think about this, as COVID has evolved in our culture, in our society today, the metaverse provides an opportunity not only for people to socialize, but for people to form workplaces. So maybe I can't go to my office space anymore, but I can enter into a virtual office space and interact with my coworkers in different and interesting new ways. This is a new opportunity for GPUs and for processing, because metaverses are going to require so much more processing power, and companies are out there doing this. The hardware, there's the virtual reality goggles, your desktops and laptops are going to need to improve in order to meet the demand of this. And then there's advertising and branding. Every day I read about a new brand that is creating an NFT or some kind of immersive experience in the metaverse, be it Gucci, Balenciaga, Adidas, Nike, and you could go on and on and on. Virtually every single brand in the world is now creating a metaverse strategy in the same way that they had a social media strategy. It's just inevitable, and it's happening today. For that, you're creating a whole bunch of opportunities for advertisers and brands who want to go and access this demographic. It's a way for Gucci or some of these other brands to access a whole new set of purchasers, people who can be loyal to the brand, as well as establishing that brand amongst people who are already users of it. There's also music, concerts, and art to consider. There's massive concerts that are happening in the metaverse. Travis Scott held a concert in Fortnite that attracted over 1 million people. Ariana Grande, Justin Bieber are all now holding events and concerts in the metaverse. This is not a passing fad. This is a way where musicians and artists are accessing a global audience, again, not bound by geography, that they can provide products to, get immediate feedback, and do this all through technology. So it's quite amazing. Who's the market here? Who's using these metaverses, or who's the potential market? We're still in the very early stages. I would say we're not even in the first inning yet. We're in the practice rounds right now. People are still trying to figure out how to maneuver in the metaverse, how to capitalize off this. But who are the people looking at this? So I have some stats. In the world, there's 4.7 billion internet users. That is your market potential. Out of that, there's 1.5 billion video gamers. Think about how many people use social media. I mean, just on Facebook, I think there's 2.5 billion people. Think about your workplace environments, education. As schools continue to be challenged with allowing students in, you can start doing things and teaching students in places like the metaverse. And it's not just for young students. Think about it for higher education, things like for medicine, a medical doctor, where you can go in there and have a graphic representation of something from all different angles, three-dimensional, that you can look around, where teachers can teach and use visuals as example. Anything that requires visualization for teaching is ideal for the metaverse. And not just that, but think about workplace learning, things for pilots, safety and health, where you can go in and have a visual representation of something in a, something like a nuclear power plant or an electrical plant, where you can actually teach the workers how to maneuver, how things work without them having to physically be there. The possibilities are really quite endless. So I had a broker reach out to me who told me he thought that this was all a passing fad. I would say Disney is going to be creating their own metaverse. You see, again, I've mentioned some of the big names that are there. All the major brands are there and committing money to this. Facebook is making this massive conversion. Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA are all focused on this area. This is not a passing fad. This is the future. And I think for people who are looking to ignore this right now, it's a little bit akin to ignoring the internet when it arose or social media. This is an old idea in that the metaverse or the concept of it has been around for decades, that his time has come. And so the way I'd like to sort of end this is the person who did tweet at me and told me that this was akin to the tulip bubble, but much worse. I sent him a reply, and he was a very famous financier, but I said, why don't you send me your fax number and I'll send you some information, then call you on your flip phone to discuss it. So I think I was just making a little bit of fun of him. But again, people who are resistant to technology generally end up missing on major trends and things that are occurring. And I would say that for this and for our investors at tokens.com, this is an area where we want to have exposure. We want to provide people exposure to so that they have access to this area, which I believe, again, we're still in the practice rounds. We're not even in the first inning. Nobody is certain as to how this is going to evolve. Will there be a few dominant metaverses? Will there be several? I think there's going to be various niches. I think you'll find that some metaverses will be very focused on education. Some will be very focused on things like concerts and art. Others will be more focused on things like commerce and fashion. We will see how this evolves, but it's very exciting. And I think for the people today, definitely something to put on your radar. It's going to be one of the hottest and most discussed topics going into next year. So maybe with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderators. And thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to speak.